Daniel Carter was an ordinary man living an ordinary life, or so it seemed. On a quiet Thursday evening, he was driving home after spending nearly 10 hours at his office, working on software updates for a small tech company in Chicago. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city streets. Daniel's old sedan wasn't anything fancy, but it was reliable and got him where he needed to go without much trouble. He liked it that way, simple, predictable, and dependable. The roads were mostly empty as Daniel drove through the suburbs. A soft hum from the car's engine filled the silence inside the vehicle. His mind wandered as he gripped the steering wheel loosely, thinking about the weekend ahead. Maybe he'd finally clean out the garage or catch up on some reading. Nothing too exciting, but then again, excitement wasn't something Daniel craved. He preferred calm and stability over chaos any day. Unbeknownst to Daniel, 2 police officers were patrolling nearby. Their names were Officer Ryan and Officer Kelly, both seasoned veterans of the force who prided themselves on keeping their community safe. They weren't bad people by any means, but years on the job had made them cautious, sometimes overly so. When they spotted Daniel's car swerving slightly between lanes, they exchanged glances. It wasn't a dramatic move, just enough to raise suspicion. Was this another drunk driver, or maybe someone texting while driving? Either way, they decided to pull him over. Daniel noticed the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror almost immediately. He sighed under his breath, though not out of frustration. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't been drinking, hadn't been speeding, and certainly hadn't been distracted by his phone. Still, being pulled over was never fun. He signaled and carefully moved to the side of the road, pulling onto the shoulder as instructed. He turned off the engine and rolled down his window, letting the cool night air flow into the car. Officer Ryan approached first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness and shining directly into Daniel's face. "License and registration, please," he said sharply, his tone more accusatory than polite. Daniel squinted against the bright light but nodded, reaching into his pocket for his wallet and leaning over to grab the registration papers from the glove compartment. "Evening, officer," Daniel said calmly, handing over the requested items. "Is there a problem?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied Daniel's face, searching for signs of intoxication or nervousness. To his credit, Daniel looked completely composed. His expression was neutral, neither defensive nor overly friendly. But Ryan misinterpreted this calmness as arrogance. In his experience, people who acted too cool during traffic stops often had something to hide. Meanwhile, Officer Kelly stood near the patrol car watching the interaction closely. She hadn't noticed anything particularly alarming about Daniel's behavior, but she trusted Ryan's instincts. If he thought something was off, she was inclined to agree. Back at Daniel's window, Ryan flipped through the documents Daniel had handed over. Everything appeared to be in order, valid license, current registration, but Ryan wasn't satisfied. "You were swerving back there," he said, his voice firm. "Mind telling me why?" Daniel blinked, taken aback by the question. "Swerving?" he repeated. "I don't think I was. I mean, I might have drifted a little, but nothing unusual. I've been driving all day, so maybe I'm just tired." Ryan frowned. Fatigue was no excuse for reckless driving, and he made sure to emphasize that point. "Tired or not, you need to stay focused behind the wheel. You could have caused an accident." "I understand," Daniel replied evenly. "But I assure you, I wasn't doing anything dangerous. I'll pay closer attention moving forward." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might de-escalate. Ryan stepped back slightly, lowering his flashlight. Just as Daniel began to relax, however, Ryan leaned in again, narrowing his eyes. "Something about this doesn't add up," he muttered, half to himself. Then louder, he added, "Step out of the vehicle, sir." Daniel froze. This was unexpected and unsettling. "Why?" he asked cautiously. "Did I do something wrong?" "I said step out of the vehicle," Ryan repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. As he stepped onto the asphalt, he raised his hands slightly, showing that he meant no harm. "Look, I'm cooperating," he said. "There's really no reason for this." Ryan ignored him, circling around to the driver's side to inspect the interior of the car. Meanwhile, Officer Kelly joined them, her hand resting casually on the holster of her gun. Daniel felt a knot forming in his stomach. What had started as a routine traffic stop was quickly spiraling out of control. As Ryan examined the car, he grew increasingly agitated. There was nothing incriminating inside. No open alcohol bottles, no drugs, no weapons, but his gut told him something was off. He couldn't put his finger on it, but Daniel's demeanor bothered him. The man was too calm, too collected. Most people would be nervous or apologetic in this situation, but Daniel seemed different. "You know what?" Ryan said suddenly, slamming the car door shut. "We're taking you in." Daniel's eyes widened. "Taking me in? For what? I haven't done anything." "Resisting compliance," Ryan snapped. Before Daniel could protest further, Ryan grabbed his arm roughly and attempted to handcuff him. Panic surged through Daniel's body. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He tried to pull away, not out of aggression, but out of sheer confusion. "Wait. Stop. You're making a mistake." To Ryan, Daniel's resistance only confirmed his suspicions. Without hesitation, he called for backup over his radio. Within minutes, additional squad cars arrived, their sirens wailing as they surrounded the scene. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn, shouting commands at Daniel. Overwhelmed and outnumbered, Daniel backed away instinctively, his heart pounding in his chest. That's when everything went sideways. In the chaos, one of the officers accidentally rammed Daniel's car with their patrol vehicle, pinning him against the side of the sedan. Pain shot through Daniel's ribs as the impact knocked the wind out of him. Gasps echoed among the officers as they realized what had happened. For a brief moment, the commotion died down, replaced by stunned silence. Daniel slumped to the ground, clutching his side and struggling to breathe. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the car door frame. Through the haze of pain and shock, one thought dominated his mind. This can't be happening. Little did anyone know this was only the beginning, because Daniel Carter wasn't just an ordinary man. Beneath his unassuming exterior lay secrets that could change the world, if they ever came to light. And now, thanks to a simple misunderstanding, those secrets were dangerously close to being exposed. The inside of the police station was cold and sterile, a sharp contrast to the chaos Daniel had just experienced outside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Daniel sat alone in a small holding cell, his hands cuffed behind his back. His head throbbed from the cut on his forehead, and every breath sent a sharp pain through his ribs where the car had hit him. He tried to focus, but his mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Why were the officers so aggressive? And, most importantly, what would happen next? Daniel leaned against the hard metal bench in the cell, trying to steady his breathing. He replayed the events in his mind, the swerving accusation, the escalating tension, the violent arrest, and still couldn't make sense of it. He hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't speeding, he wasn't drunk, and he certainly wasn't resisting. So why had they treated him like a criminal? But deep down, Daniel knew there was more to it than just a misunderstanding. There always was. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly midnight. No one had come to check on him since they'd thrown him into the cell hours ago. His phone had been confiscated, so he couldn't call anyone for help. Not that he could explain the situation, even if he did manage to reach someone. "Hey, I got arrested because some cops thought I was suspicious," he muttered under his breath. "Oh, and by the way, I'm part of a secret organization that protects Earth from alien threats." Yeah, that would go over well. The thought made him chuckle bitterly. If only they knew who he really was. But revealing that truth wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. The risks were too great. Not just for him, but for everyone involved. Daniel sighed and closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wall. He needed to think clearly, but the throbbing pain in his head made it difficult. He tried to focus instead on the sound of distant footsteps echoing down the hallway outside the cell. Occasionally, voices drifted past, officers talking about paperwork or sharing stories from their shifts, but none of them seemed concerned with the man locked up in the corner of the station. As time passed, Daniel's frustration grew. He knew he couldn't stay silent forever. Eventually, he'd have to say something, do something to get himself out of this mess. But what? Claiming innocence hadn't worked earlier. Explaining his true identity was out of the question. What other options did he have? Just as despair began to creep in, a faint vibration tickled the base of Daniel's skull. At first, he thought it was his imagination, a side effect of stress or exhaustion. But then it happened again, stronger this time. It wasn't painful, exactly, but it was unmistakable. The neural implant embedded in his brain was activating. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The implant was designed to interface with alien technology, allowing him to communicate silently with members of the Veil, the covert organization he worked for. Someone must have noticed his arrest and was trying to reach him. Relief washed over him, followed quickly by apprehension. If the Veil knew he was in trouble, it meant they were watching. And if they were watching, they might intervene. The thought should have comforted him, but it didn't. Interventions by the Veil rarely ended quietly. Their methods were efficient, yes, but also extreme. They wouldn't hesitate to erase evidence or people if it meant protecting their secrets. Daniel didn't want anyone else getting hurt because of him. Still, he couldn't ignore the signal. Closing his eyes, he focused on the sensation, letting the implant connect him to whoever was reaching out. Within moments, a voice whispered in his mind, not audibly but directly into his thoughts. It was Emily Dawson, one of his closest colleagues in the Veil. "Daniel, are you okay?" her mental voice asked, laced with concern. "I've been better," Daniel replied silently, careful not to move his lips. "What's going on?" "We're monitoring local law enforcement channels," Emily explained. "Word of your arrest spread quickly. Are you injured?" "A little banged up, but nothing serious," Daniel said. "They think I'm just some random guy. They don't know about, you know." "Good," Emily said firmly. "Keep it that way. We're working on getting you out, but we need to be careful. This isn't a typical extraction." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "There's something unusual about this situation," Emily admitted. "The level of force used during your arrest, it doesn't match standard protocol. We're running checks on the officers involved, but something feels off." Daniel nodded slightly, though no one could see him. "I agree, these guys weren't acting normal. They jumped straight to handcuffs and accusations without giving me a chance to explain." Emily hesitated before responding. "We'll figure it out. For now, stay calm and don't provoke them. Alex is putting together a team to retrieve you. Just hold tight." "Easy for you to say," Daniel muttered silently. "You're not the one stuck in a cell with a headache and a bruised ego." Despite his sarcasm, Emily's words brought a small measure of comfort. Knowing that help was on the way made the weight feel slightly less unbearable. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just bad luck. Something bigger was at play here, and he had a sinking suspicion it involved the Veil. Hours passed slowly. Daniel dozed off occasionally, only to wake up with a start when a loud noise jolted him back to reality. Each time he scanned the room, half expecting someone to burst in and demand answers, but the door remained shut, and the hallway outside stayed eerily quiet. Finally, just as dawn began to break, the sound of approaching footsteps reached Daniel's ears. Heavy boots clomped against the tiled floor, accompanied by the jangle of keys. A tall officer appeared in front of the cell, unlocking the door with a metallic clang. Behind him stood another figure, a woman in plain clothes, her expression unreadable. "Carter," the officer barked. "You've got a visitor." Daniel blinked, confused. A visitor? Who would come see him at this hour? Slowly he stood up, wincing as pain shot through his side. As he stepped out of the cell, the woman stepped forward, introducing herself in a clipped tone. "Mr. Carter, I'm Detective Laura Hayes. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Daniel studied her face carefully. She looked professional enough, dressed in a crisp blazer and slacks, but there was something about her demeanor that set off warning bells in his mind. Her gaze was too intense, too calculating. This wasn't a routine follow-up. "Questions about what?" Daniel asked cautiously. "About your connection to certain activities," Hayes replied vaguely. "Things that don't quite add up." Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Don't play dumb with me, Mr. Carter. You were driving erratically, resisted arrest, and now we find traces of unregistered tech in your vehicle. Care to explain?" Daniel's stomach dropped. Unregistered tech? They must have found something linked to the veil, a gadget or device he'd forgotten to remove before leaving headquarters. His mind raced as he tried to come up with a plausible excuse, but Hayes didn't give him much time to think. "Let's take a walk," she said, gesturing for him to follow. "We'll talk in private." Reluctantly, Daniel obeyed, trailing after Hayes as she led him down a narrow corridor. The officer stayed close behind, ensuring he couldn't escape. Every step felt heavier than the last, each one pulling Daniel deeper into uncertainty. Whatever Hayes wanted to discuss, it wasn't good news. When they reached a dimly lit interrogation room, Hayes motioned for Daniel to sit. He complied, sinking into the hard plastic chair across from her. She took the seat opposite him, placing a folder on the table between them. Inside, Daniel caught glimpses of photos and documents, evidence presumably of whatever they'd discovered in his car. Hayes opened the folder and slid a photograph toward him. It showed a small, metallic object, a piece of alien tech disguised as a USB drive. Daniel recognized it instantly. It was a data storage unit used by the Veil to transfer encrypted information. Somehow it had ended up in his car. "This belongs to you, doesn't it?" Hayes asked, leaning forward. Daniel shook his head. "No idea what that is," Hayes smirked. "Really? Because our tech experts say it's unlike anything they've ever seen. Advanced tech, possibly experimental. And guess what? It was hidden in your glove compartment." Daniel forced himself to remain calm. "Look, I don't know how that got there. Someone must have planted it." "Convenient excuse," Hayes said dryly. "But let's cut to the chase. We know you're hiding something, Carter. The question is, are you going to tell us willingly, or are we going to have to dig it out of you?" Daniel clenched his fists under the table, his mind racing. He couldn't afford to crack. Not yet. Not until he understood what Hayes really knew and how far she was willing to go to get answers. Outside the station, unbeknownst to Daniel, Emily and Alex were already putting their plan into motion. Armed with forged credentials and cutting-edge surveillance equipment, they prepared to infiltrate the precinct and retrieve their teammate. Time was running out and the stakes were higher than ever. If Hayes pushed too hard, Daniel might be forced to reveal secrets that could compromise everything the Veil had worked so hard to protect. For now, though, all Daniel could do was sit tight and hope his training, and his allies, would be enough to get him through this nightmare. The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing minute. Daniel sat stiffly in his chair, his eyes locked on Detective Hayes as she flipped through the folder in front of her. The metallic object, the alien tech disguised as a USB drive, lay on the table between them like a ticking time bomb. Every question Hayes asked seemed designed to chip away at Daniel's composure, but he refused to give in. He couldn't. Hayes leaned back in her seat, studying him intently. "You're not a bad liar, Carter," she said finally, her tone almost casual. "But you're not good enough. We know this tech isn't human-made, and we know it's linked to something bigger. So why don't you save us both some time and tell me what you're involved in?" Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I told you I don't know anything about that thing. It's not mine." Hayes smirked, clearly unconvinced. "Sure. And I suppose someone just randomly decided to stash advanced alien technology in your car? Come on, Carter. Who are you working for?" Daniel's mind raced. He needed to stall, to buy time until Emily and Alex could get to him. But how? Hayes wasn't going to let up any time soon. She was smart, methodical, and relentless. If he slipped up even once, she'd tear him apart. "Look," Daniel said slowly, trying to sound calm despite the storm raging inside him. I'm just a regular guy. I work at a tech company. I drive an old sedan. I've never seen that thing before in my life. You're barking up the wrong tree. Hayes tilted her head, her sharp gaze piercing through him. Funny you should say that. Because our analysts trace some unusual activity tied to your name. Financial transactions, encrypted communications, trips to places you shouldn't have any reason to visit. Care to explain those? Daniel's heart sank. They dug deeper than he expected. His cover identity was solid, or at least it was supposed to be, but no disguise was perfect. There were always cracks, tiny details that could unravel everything if someone looked closely enough, and Hayes was looking very closely. I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel said firmly, though his voice wavered slightly. Maybe there's been some kind of mistake. Hayes sighed dramatically, closing the folder and leaning forward again. Here's the deal, Carter. I can keep dragging this out, or you can start talking. Your choice. But trust me, things will go a lot easier for you if you cooperate. Before Daniel could respond, a knock sounded at the door. A uniformed officer poked his head in, whispering something to Hayes. Her expression shifted instantly, annoyance giving way to curiosity. She nodded briskly and stood up, turning to Daniel. We'll continue this later, she said curtly. Don't go anywhere. As Hayes left the room, Daniel exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging with relief. For now he was safe, at least, from her relentless questioning. But he knew this reprieve wouldn't last long. Hayes would be back, and next time she might not be so patient. Outside the station, Emily Dawson and Alex Monroe were putting their plan into action. Dressed in plain clothes and carrying forged federal badges, they approached the front desk of the precinct. The officer manning the desk looked up as they arrived, his brow furrowing slightly. Can I help you? He asked, his tone polite but wary. Emily flashed her badge. Agents Dawson and Monroe, she said smoothly. We're here regarding the detainee, Daniel Carter. We've been informed there may be national security implications tied to his case. The officer blinked, clearly caught off guard. National security? I'll need to confirm this with Detective Hayes. No need, Alex interjected quickly, stepping forward. Detective Hayes is already aware of our involvement. In fact, she requested we take over immediately due to the sensitive nature of the situation. The officer hesitated, glancing between them uncertainly. Emily seized the moment, pulling out a fake document on official-looking letterhead. This should clear things up, she said, sliding it across the desk. The officer scanned the paper, his frown deepening. Whatever doubts he had, the official seals and signatures seemed convincing enough. After a few tense seconds, he nodded reluctantly. All right, follow me. As they moved through the station, Emily and Alex exchanged quick glances. So far, so good. But getting to Daniel was only half the battle. They still needed to extract him without drawing attention, and that meant dealing with whoever else was watching. Back in the interrogation room, Daniel heard footsteps approaching. He braced himself, expecting Hayes to return. Instead, the door opened to reveal Emily and Alex. Relief flooded through him, though he kept his expression neutral. Mr. Carter, Emily said loudly, addressing him as if they'd never met. We're here to escort you to a secure location. Please come with us. Daniel nodded, standing up slowly. His ribs still ached, but he forced himself to move steadily. As they exited the room, Alex subtly handed him a small device, a signal jammer designed to block surveillance equipment. Daniel palmed it discreetly, activating it with a flick of his thumb. The trio made their way toward the exit, careful to avoid drawing suspicion. Along the way, they passed several officers, including Hayes, who was deep in conversation with another detective. She glanced up briefly as they walked by but didn't stop them. For now, their cover held. Once outside, Emily and Alex guided Daniel to a nondescript van parked a block away. Inside, Jake Miller sat hunched over a laptop, monitoring police communications in real time. Clear coast, he reported as they climbed in, but we've got company nearby. Someone's been tailing the precinct since Hayes showed up. Emily frowned. Who? Jake shook his head. Unknown. Civilian plates, no ID match. Could be freelance, could be worse. Alex turned to Daniel. Did Hayes mention anything specific during the interrogation? She knows something's off, Daniel admitted. She mentioned financial records and encrypted messages. They're digging deeper than I thought. Emily cursed under her breath. This complicates things. If they trace the tech back to the veil... They won't, Alex interrupted sharply. Not if we act fast. Let's regroup at the safe house and figure out our next move. As the van sped away, none of them noticed the black sedan trailing behind them at a cautious distance. Inside, a man watched silently through tinted windows, his face obscured by shadows. Victor Lane smiled faintly to himself, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. It seems I'm not the only one interested in Daniel Carter, he murmured to himself. This should be interesting. Meanwhile, back at the safe house, a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods. The team gathered around a cluttered table strewn with maps, files, and gadgets. Jake worked furiously on his laptop, attempting to scrub digital traces of Daniel's arrest while Emily paced anxiously. We need to contain the fallout, Emily said, rubbing her temples. If Hayes connects the dots, it's not just Daniel. Who's compromised? It's all of us. Alex nodded grimly. And then there's whoever's following us. Freelancers? Rivals? Or someone closer to home? Daniel listened quietly, his mind racing. He trusted his teammates implicitly, but the weight of recent events pressed heavily on him. How had things spiraled so quickly? One moment he was just another guy driving home from work. The next he was at the center of a conspiracy that threatened to expose the veil entirely. We can't stay here forever, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. Sooner or later they'll find us. What's plan B? Emily exchanged a glance with Alex before answering. Plan B is finding out who's pulling the strings. If Hayes has intel on you, it didn't come from local sources. Someone fed her information, and we need to know who. And if it's internal, Daniel asked pointedly, what if the veil itself is leaking? The room fell silent. The possibility hung in the air like a dark cloud. Betrayal within the organization wasn't unheard of, but it was rare and devastating when it happened. Before anyone could respond, the sound of tires crunching gravel outside shattered the quiet. Everyone froze, exchanging alarmed looks. No. One was supposed to know about the safe house. Stay low, Alex ordered, grabbing a weapon from a nearby bag. Jake, kill the lights. As darkness enveloped the cabin, the group moved cautiously toward the windows, peering out into the night. The black sedan came to a stop just beyond the tree line, its headlights cutting through the gloom. A single figure stepped out, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. I mean no harm, Victor Lane called out, his voice calm but firm. But I think we have a lot to discuss. Emily tightened her grip on her gun, her jaw clenched. Victor, she spat. What are you doing here? Victor smiled faintly, unfazed by the hostility. Saving you from yourselves, he replied. Though judging by the look on your faces, I may already be too late. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victor Lane stood outside, his hand still raised in surrender, as Emily Dawson and Alex Monroe exchanged wary glances. Inside, Daniel Carter leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. Jake Miller hovered near the laptop, ready to shut it down completely if things went south. Stay back, Emily warned, her voice sharp and steady. She held her gun pointed at Victor through the window, though she knew firing would only make matters worse. You're not welcome here. Victor didn't flinch. Instead, he took a cautious step forward, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. I'm not your enemy, he said calmly, but I can help you figure out who is. Alex moved closer to the door, his weapon drawn but lowered slightly. Why should we trust you? He demanded. Last time anyone heard from you, you were burning bridges and disappearing off the grid. Victor's smile faded, replaced by a somber expression. Because I've seen what the veil has become, and because I know they're using you, all of you, as pawns in a game you don't fully understand. Emily hesitated, torn between skepticism and curiosity. Victor had once been one of them, a trusted member of the Veil before he vanished, without explanation. Rumors swirled about why he left. Some said he'd gone rogue, others claimed he'd uncovered secrets too dangerous to ignore. Either way, his reappearance now couldn't be a coincidence. "What do you want, Victor?" Daniel asked finally, speaking up for the first time. His tone was guarded but tinged with frustration. "If you've got something to say, say it, otherwise leave us alone." Victor nodded slowly, as if expecting resistance. "Fair enough. But this isn't a conversation we can have out here. Let me inside, and I'll explain everything." Emily glanced at Alex, silently seeking his opinion. He gave a slight shrug, his grip tightening on his weapon. It wasn't an endorsement, but it wasn't outright rejection either. After a long pause, Emily stepped aside and opened the door just wide enough for Victor to slip inside. As soon as he entered, Jake closed the curtains and dimmed the lights further, ensuring no prying eyes could see inside. Victor surveyed the room briefly, taking note of the scattered maps and gadgets. Then he turned to face the group, his demeanor calm but resolute. "I'll get straight to the point," he began. "The Veil isn't what it claims to be anymore. When I was part of the organization, I started noticing inconsistencies, missions. That didn't add up. Resources being diverted, operatives disappearing under mysterious circumstances. At first I thought it was paranoia, but then I dug deeper." He paused, letting his words sink in. No one interrupted him, though their expressions ranged from suspicion to unease. "What I found changed everything," Victor continued. "The Veil isn't protecting humanity, it's controlling it. Using alien tech to manipulate governments, suppress dissent, and shape society according to their agenda. They've been experimenting on civilians, implanting tracking devices, disguised as medical treatments, all while hiding behind the guise of keeping Earth safe." A heavy silence followed his revelation. Emily stared at him, her jaw clenched. "That's impossible," she said firmly. "The Veil exists to defend humanity, to stop threats before they even reach us. You're talking nonsense." Victor shook his head. "Am I? Think about it. How many times have you questioned orders that seemed off? Missions where the objectives weren't clear or the methods felt wrong? Or how about Daniel's arrest tonight? Why did Hayes know so much? Who tipped her off?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Victor's questions hit uncomfortably, close to home. He'd always trusted the Veil implicitly, believing in its noble purpose, but recent events had planted seeds of doubt in his mind, seeds that Victor's words were now watering. "And let's not forget the tech in your car," Victor added, nodding toward Daniel. "It wasn't planted by accident. Someone wanted you exposed. Maybe to test your loyalty. Maybe to send a message." Emily's hand tightened around her gun, though she kept it lowered. "Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, why come to us now? What's your angle?" Victor met her gaze steadily. "Because I want to stop them. Expose the truth, but I can't do it alone. Together, we might stand a chance." Alex scoffed, breaking the tense quiet. "And what? Join forces with a traitor? For all we know, you're the one feeding information to people like Hayes." Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I expected this reaction. Fine, don't trust me. But ask yourselves this. If I were working against you, why would I risk showing up here tonight? Why not just let Hayes tear Daniel apart and expose the Veil myself?" No one had an answer to that. The logic was sound, even if the situation felt surreal. For a moment, everyone simply stood there, weighing their options. Finally, Daniel spoke up. "Say we believe you. What's the plan?" Victor's lips curved into a faint smile. "We hit them where it hurts, their central hub. It's buried deep beneath a mountain range in Colorado, heavily guarded and packed with classified data. If we can infiltrate it, we'll find proof of everything I've told you. Evidence we can use to take them down." Emily frowned. "That's suicide. Even if we manage to get in, getting out alive will be next to impossible." "It's risky," Victor admitted, But it's our best shot. Do you really want to keep working for an organization that sees you as expendable? The question hung in the air unanswered. Each member of the group wrestled with their own doubts and fears. Trusting Victor meant taking a leap into the unknown. But staying loyal to the Veil meant ignoring the growing cracks in its foundation. After what felt like an eternity, Alex broke the silence. Fine, we'll do it. But if you're lying to us, Victor, I swear I'll put a bullet in your head myself. Victor nodded solemnly. Fair enough. Now, let's get to work. Over the next few hours, the team huddled together, poring over maps and schematics of the Veil's central hub. Jake worked tirelessly on his laptop, hacking into secure networks to gather intel on guard rotations and security systems. Emily and Alex debated strategies, arguing over which approach would give them the best odds of success. Meanwhile, Daniel sat quietly, lost in thought. For years he'd dedicated his life to the Veil, believing he was making a difference. But now, faced with the possibility that everything he'd fought for was built on lies, he felt adrift. Was he truly prepared to turn his back on the organization? Could he live with the consequences if they failed? Victor noticed Daniel's unease and approached him cautiously. You okay? He asked softly, keeping his voice low so the others wouldn't overhear. Daniel shrugged, forcing a weak smile. Just thinking about how much I believed in them. In us. Victor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It's not easy, realizing the people you trusted aren't who they claim to be. But sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest truths. Before Daniel could respond, Emily called everyone back to the table. We've got a plan, she announced. It's risky, but it's doable. Here's how it goes. As she outlined the details, the weight of what they were about to attempt settled over the group. Breaking into the Veil's most secure facility would require precision, teamwork, and a lot of luck. Failure wasn't an option, not when the stakes were this high. By dawn, preparations were complete. The team loaded up the van with weapons, tools, and supplies, each member steeling themselves for the mission ahead. As they pulled away from the safe house, Victor glanced out the window, his expression grim. No turning back now, he murmured. Daniel nodded silently, gripping the edge of his seat. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The journey to Colorado was long and tense, the kind of quiet that made every small sound. Tires humming against asphalt, the occasional rustle of papers, feel deafening. The van rocked gently as it sped down winding mountain roads, the early, morning mist clinging to the trees like a ghostly veil. Inside, the team sat in uneasy silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Emily drove with both hands gripping the wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She hadn't said much since leaving the safe house, her focus entirely on the road ahead. Beside her, Alex studied a map spread across his lap, tracing possible routes with a finger while muttering under his breath. In the backseat, Jake tapped furiously at his laptop, monitoring security feeds and communications from the Veil's central hub. Every so often, he'd pause to relay updates to the group, though none of them brought much comfort. Daniel sat, slumped against the window, staring out at the endless expanse of forest rolling past. His mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. Was Victor right about the Veil? Had they really been manipulated all this time? And if so, what would happen once the truth came out? He wanted to believe there was still good in the organization, the people, the ideals. But doubt gnawed at him relentlessly. Victor, seated across from Daniel, watched him carefully. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, he said quietly, breaking the silence. Daniel glanced at him, forcing a weak smile. Feels like I am. Victor leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Listen, I know this isn't easy for you. It wasn't easy for me either when I first realized what was happening. But remember this. No matter how hard things get, you're doing the right thing. Sometimes tearing something down is the only way to build something better. Daniel didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the window, watching as sunlight began to pierce through the clouds. Maybe Victor was right, or maybe he was just another liar. Either way, Daniel knew one thing for certain: they were running out of time to find out. By late afternoon, the van pulled off the main road and onto a narrow dirt path leading deeper into the mountains. The air grew colder as they climbed higher, the trees thinning until only jagged rocks and patches of snow remained. Finally, they reached a secluded overlook where they could survey the terrain below without being seen. Through binoculars, Emily scanned the valley ahead. Nestled within the rocky landscape was the Vale's central hub, a massive fortified structure partially buried beneath the earth. Its sleek metallic exterior gleamed faintly in the fading light, surrounded by layers of fencing, guard towers, and automated defense systems. Even from a distance, it looked impenetrable. "This is it," Emily said grimly, lowering the binoculars. "Any last-minute ideas?" Jake adjusted his glasses, typing furiously on his laptop. "I've managed to disable some of their external cameras temporarily, but it won't last long. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they reset." Alex nodded, reviewing the plan one final time. "We stick together until we reach the data core. Once we're inside, Jake and I will handle the tech while Emily and Daniel cover us. Victor, you stay outside and keep watch. If anything goes wrong, you're our extraction point." Victor frowned but didn't argue. "Fine, but don't take too long. This place is crawling with guards." With the plan set, the group geared up, strapping on backpacks filled with tools and weapons. Each step felt heavier than the last as they moved cautiously toward the facility, sticking to the shadows to avoid detection. The cold wind bit at their faces, but adrenaline kept them moving forward. Reaching the outer perimeter proved easier than expected thanks to Jake's hacking skills. A section of the fence flickered briefly before shutting down entirely, creating a gap just wide enough for them to slip through. Still, the real challenge lay ahead. As they approached the main entrance, Alex signaled for everyone to stop. 2 armed guards stood posted outside, chatting idly as they waited for their shift to end. Emily raised her weapon, ready to act, but Daniel stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Wait," he whispered. "Let me try something." Before anyone could protest, Daniel stepped forward, keeping his hands visible as he approached the guards. "Hey," he called out, feigning panic. "There's been an accident near the East Ridge. One of our teams needs backup immediately." The guards exchanged confused glances. "What are you talking about?" one of them demanded. "Nobody told us about any accident." "It just happened," Daniel insisted, stepping closer. "They radioed in, but communication must have cut out. Look, I don't have time to explain. It's bad, really bad." The guards hesitated, clearly torn between duty and curiosity. Seizing the moment, Emily and Alex crept up behind them, knocking them unconscious with swift, precise strikes. Within seconds, the guards were subdued, their bodies dragged out of sight. "Well, that worked," Alex muttered dryly as they slipped inside the facility. The interior of the hub was even more intimidating than the exterior. Long, sterile hallways, stretched in every direction, lined with reinforced doors and blinking control panels. Armed patrols roamed the corridors, their boots echoing ominously against the tiled floors. Security cameras tracked movement constantly, their red lights glaring like unblinking eyes. Jake led the way, navigating the labyrinthine complex with practiced ease. "This way," he whispered, pointing toward a set of stairs descending deeper, underground. "The data core should be 2 levels down." They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows whenever possible. Twice they narrowly avoided detection, ducking into alcoves or side rooms as patrols passed by. Tension mounted with each passing minute, the knowledge that they were running out of time pressing down on them like a physical weight. Finally, they reached the data core, a vast chamber filled with rows upon rows of servers and glowing consoles. At its center stood a pedestal-like device, pulsing softly with an otherworldly light. Jake rushed to it immediately, plugging in a portable drive to begin downloading classified files. "How long will it take?" Emily asked, scanning the room for threats. 5 minutes, Jake replied tersely, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Maybe less if I can bypass these firewalls faster." While Jake worked, Daniel and Emily kept watch, weapons drawn and nerves taut. Alex patrolled the perimeter, ensuring no one snuck up on them unnoticed. For a brief moment, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Then alarms blared. Bright red lights flashed throughout the chamber, bathing everyone in harsh, strobing illumination. Automated defenses sprang to life, metal shutters slamming down over exits and heavy turrets emerging from hidden compartments in the walls. "They know we're here," Alex shouted, diving for cover as bullets ricocheted off nearby surfaces. "Keep going," Emily yelled back at Jake. "Don't stop." Jake nodded frantically, sweat dripping from his brow as he typed faster than ever before. "Almost done." Outside, Victor cursed under his breath as he watched chaos unfold through a pair of binoculars. Reinforcements were already pouring into the valley, their vehicles kicking up dust as they converged on the facility. He grabbed his radio, barking orders to the others. "You've got company incoming. Get out of there now." Inside, the team scrambled to finish their mission. Emily and Daniel fired blindly at the turrets, trying to create enough distraction for Jake to complete the download. Sparks flew as metal clashed with metal, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt wiring. Finally, Jake let out a triumphant shout. "Got it, let's go!" Without hesitation, the group bolted for the nearest exit, dodging gunfire and explosions as they went. The facility shook violently around them, collapsing in places as self-destruct protocols kicked in. They barely made it outside before the entire structure erupted in a fiery blast, sending shockwaves rippling through the valley. Breathless and battered, the team regrouped with Victor at the overlook, clutching the precious data drive like a lifeline. As they stared back at the burning ruins, a mixture of relief and dread settled over them. "We did it," Daniel said softly, though his voice lacked conviction. "Now what?" Victor sighed, looking at each of them in turn. "Now, we expose the truth, no matter the cost." The team stood at the edge of the overlook, watching as flames consumed the Vale's central hub. Smoke billowed into the sky, painting the horizon an eerie orange. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of what they'd just done, and what it meant, settled over them like a heavy blanket. Daniel clutched the data drive tightly in his hand, its smooth surface cool against his palm. This tiny device held secrets that could change everything. Secrets about experiments on civilians, manipulation of governments, and lies told to protect an organization that had long since lost its way. But exposing those secrets wouldn't be easy. They were up against an enemy with deep roots, vast resources, and no qualms about silencing anyone who stood in their way. Victor broke the silence first. "We need to move," he said urgently, glancing over his shoulder. "They'll send search parties soon. We can't stay here." Emily nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Where do we go?" Victor hesitated, then pointed toward the van parked a short distance away. "There's a safe house I've been using. It's remote, secure, and off the grid. We can regroup there and decide our next steps." No one argued. Time was running out, and staying put wasn't an option. They piled back into the van, adrenaline still coursing through their veins as Emily sped down the mountain roads, leaving the burning wreckage behind. The safe house was a small cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine and dust, and the furniture looked worn but sturdy. It wasn't luxurious, but it was functional, a place to lay low while they figured out how to release the information without getting killed in the process. Jake immediately set up his laptop, connecting the data drive to begin sifting through the files. His fingers flew across the keyboard as lines of code and encrypted documents filled the screen. "This is going to take some time," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "There's a lot of data here, and most of it's heavily protected." "Take all the time you need," Alex said firmly, pacing near the window. "But hurry. We don't know how long we have before they track us down." As Jake worked, the others gathered around the table discussing their options. Emily spread out a map of the United States, marking key locations where the Vale operated. "If we want to expose them, we'll need proof people can't ignore," she said. "Something undeniable." Victor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. We hit them everywhere at once. Leak the data to news outlets, social media, government agencies, anyone who can amplify the message. Once the public knows what's been happening, the veil won't be able to cover it up. But doing that puts a target on our backs. Daniel interjected, his voice tense. They'll come after us, all of us. And if we don't do it, they'll keep doing what they've always done, Victor countered sharply. Is that really better? Daniel didn't answer right away. He knew Victor was right, but the thought of putting innocent lives at risk weighed heavily on him. Still, staying silent wasn't an option either. Not anymore. Fine, Daniel said finally, his tone resolute. Let's do it. But we make sure the world hears the truth, not just rumors or half-truths. Everything. Hours passed as Jake painstakingly decrypted the files, piecing together evidence of the veil's corruption. Documented experiments on unsuspecting civilians, financial records showing bribes paid to politicians, classified reports detailing covert operations designed to manipulate global events. Each revelation was more damning than the last. This is insane, Emily whispered, scrolling through a list of names. Ordinary people whose lives had been ruined by the veil's actions. How could they think this was okay? They didn't care, Victor replied bitterly. To them, these people were expendable, collateral damage in their grand plan to protect humanity. Alex clenched his fists, anger boiling beneath the surface. Not anymore. If we pull this off, the veil's finished. By dawn, Jake had compiled enough evidence to create a comprehensive dossier. He uploaded the files to multiple secure servers, ensuring they couldn't be deleted or blocked once released. Then he prepared a viral campaign to spread the information online, targeting journalists, activists, and whistleblowers who could verify and amplify the story. It's ready, Jake announced, leaning back in his chair. Once we hit send, there's no turning back. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would define not only their futures, but also the future of humanity itself. Do it, Emily said firmly, breaking the tension. Jake hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pressed enter. Instantly, the files began uploading to countless platforms worldwide. Tweets exploded across social media. News outlets scrambled to confirm the reports. Governments launched investigations. Within hours, the world was ablaze with outrage. As the news spread, chaos erupted. Protesters took to the streets demanding answers and accountability. Politicians called emergency meetings, trying to distance themselves from the veil's crimes. Meanwhile, the veil fought back, issuing denials and attempting to discredit the leaks. But the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Their empire of lies was crumbling. At the safe house, the team watched it all unfold on a small TV, their emotions a mix of triumph and exhaustion. They'd done it. They'd exposed the truth. But none of them felt like celebrating. What happens now? Daniel asked quietly, breaking the silence. We disappear, Victor replied, his voice steady. For a while, at least. Until things calm down. Emily shook her head. That's not enough. We need to rebuild. Find a way to protect humanity without controlling it. Victor smiled faintly. One step at a time. Days turned into weeks, as the fallout from the leak continued. Arrests were made, lawsuits filed, entire divisions of the Veil dismantled. Though the organization wasn't completely destroyed, its power was shattered beyond repair. People demanded transparency, justice, and change. Daniel returned to Chicago briefly, walking the same streets where his nightmare had begun. He visited the spot where the police had pulled him over, reflecting on how drastically his life had changed since that night. He wasn't the same man anymore, and neither was the world. In the end, Daniel chose to remain part of the fight, working alongside Emily, Alex, Jake, and even Victor to build something new. Something better. Together, they vowed to honor the ideals the Veil had betrayed, to protect humanity, not control it. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, dangers, and sacrifices along the way. But for the first time in years, Daniel felt hopeful. hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the truth could set everyone free.